Resonated. With me now is the Trade Minister, Australia's Trade Minister, Steve Ciobo. Thank you very much for your time tonight. When you look at all that Donald Trump has said in the lead up to this, and now the fact that he's going to be president, is there anything positive to look for in terms of the global trade outlook?
Well, there is, David. I mean, if you actually have a close look at what it is that President-elect Trump has said and the platform upon which he took to the campaign, what he made clear was that he wasn't abandoning free trade at all. What he said was that he wanted trade deals that worked in America's national interest, that promoted American jobs, that improved American wages, and reduced America's trade deficit. Now, I can say that Australia pursues obviously those same outcomes in an Australian context. That is, we want trade deals that are good for Australian workers. We want trade deals that are good for improving Australia's budget position. We want trade deals that are good for growing the Australian economy. So, you know, I think it's sometimes very important to cut through how certain comments are spun, in other words, how they might be reported, versus what it is that, in this particular case, President-elect Trump has actually said.
I don't think there's any spinning, though, or any doubt that Donald Trump wants to tear up NAFTA and certainly wants to tear up the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which you're pursuing as well. Let me go to the TPP. Is that now dead in the water?
Well, David, you have to say after today's outcome, it's certainly less likely than likely. Obviously, there is a lame duck session that continues, and we'll have to wait and see what transpires in that lame duck session, but I'd certainly hold the view that it would appear in a US domestic context that it's less likely than likely, absolutely.
I know we've spoken about this in the past before, about selling the benefits of trade, and that really is the job of you in Australia as the Trade Minister. But again, we've seen here a rejection of the free trade argument. And, you know, do you fear that is growing in Australia as well? Are you losing this argument about why free trade is a good thing?
Well, David, I think we've had tremendous opportunity to have a look at the way in which the three free trade agreements that Australia recently completed with China, with South Korea and Japan have impacted on Australia. I mean, Australians can see for themselves the results of these three free trade agreements. And what they'll see, if they look at the results of these agreements, is that these agreements are driving a surge of exports from Australia. A surge of exports that's creating job opportunities in Australia, that's helping to reduce unemployment in this country, that has in many respects underpinned economic growth in this country. And that is a different set of circumstances to the circumstances that the United States finds themselves in, and certainly the circumstances as portrayed by President-elect Trump, and no doubt responded to by those people who took the decision to vote for President Trump, especially through the Midwest, as you said. Now, the fact is that free trade is serving Australia very well. We have had 25 years of continuous economic growth. Now, that's not to say that everything is rosy, but on any objective measure, our economy is doing relatively well. We've got unemployment trending down. We've got stronger economic growth. And that is a consequence, not completely, but in large part, due to the very favourable export conditions that are driving record Australian exports internationally.
Let me ask you a couple of specific things that Donald Trump has said repeatedly through this campaign. He wants to name China a currency manipulator. Would you like to see that happen?
Well, I'm not sure at this early stage precisely what that will mean. We'll need to wait and see what the President-elect Trump's new administration ultimately would seek to do there. There are a number of countries around the world that, of course, peg their currencies against the US dollar. There is a certain amount of uncertainty about exactly how policies will be implemented and carried out. So we're just going to have to wait and see to actually determine what that looks like, David.
Is there a danger, though, a risk that naming China a currency manipulator is going to spark a trade war between the two biggest economies?
Well, I'm not going to pretend that there's not a risk that we might see some challenges with respect to international trade environment. But, you know, this is precisely the reason why the world needs to pull together to drive economic growth, which is achieved, of course, through trade agreements. I mean, make no mistake, David, President-elect Trump has indicated that he is still highly desirous of achieving trade outcomes. He wants to drive trade for America. What he has said is that he wants to make sure he does it in a way that benefits America. So it's a case of watching how those policies will be implemented. Australia is, of course, a long-time friend, ally, trade partner with the United States. We've got the Australian-US Free Trade Agreement. I'm pretty confident that that's a deal that produces a great win-win outcome for Australia and the United States.
And the Trump administration is also, well, the Trump administration, Donald Trump has also said his administration will impose a penalty of 35%, and I think he's talking about a 35% tariff, on any American country that sends jobs offshore. So for an American company, I mean, you can pick out a tech company, a manufacturing company, whatever, that we're trying to attract to Australia. What will this mean? Will this mean a pretty big disincentive to set up shop over in Australia?
Well, I mean, again, we'll need to see precisely what that is implemented like and where the Congress ends up going on these types of matters. I mean, we know that there's certain aspirations and visions and statements that President-elect Trump has made. What's said and ultimately what's implemented are two sometimes different things, and so we need to see the detail on a lot of this. It's too early to say, but look, the fundamental fact is this, David. Australia will continue to prosper.
It sounds like a lot of blanks need to be filled in
trade.
here as far as you're concerned on all of these things.
Look, there are. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. There's a number of important and key and fundamental policy aspects where all we have is a statement or, you know, a sentence or two, and we need to see how that's fleshed out over the coming months.
Let me ask you on the politics of what's happened here. This is extraordinary, as we keep saying, in American political history and, you know, globally as well. How do you characterise what's happened here? This turnout of Trump supporters right across the country that the polls got wrong, the media got wrong, so many pundits got wrong. What do you think's gone on?
Well, we've seen this now globally in quite a number of occasions, David, where the results haven't accorded with the polls. I think that people are very savvy to political polls these days. I think they're very savvy to what the implications of their answers are. And frankly, I think that people don't necessarily want to disclose actually what they're going to do, and will just give a response based upon, you know, any particular issue that they might have on that day, rather than an actual reflection of voting intent. So we've just got to wait and see how that plays out. Ultimately, what I think is happening in the United States, I think there's a strong desire clearly evident from the people in the US, for America to have shine back. And clearly there's a view that America has lost some of its lustre. And I think that Donald Trump has successfully appealed to that. I obviously want to work very closely as a member of the coalition government here in Australia, as a representative of Australia, with the incoming Trump administration to make sure that we can secure great outcomes for Australia, great outcomes for the United States. The fact is that we have worked alongside each other for many years. We've been strong economic friends, strong defence friends, and of course we've got incredibly strong people-to-people links. We share values. Ultimately, I think this will mean that Australia is very well placed with respect to the United States, and I'm very confident that we'll be able to produce an outcome that's going to be great for the US and great for Australia.
Trade Minister Steve Ciobo, I appreciate you joining us tonight with your immediate reaction on this amazing